Virginia Governor Ralph Northam's reconciliation tour continues with more promises to back legislation that is sure to please many of Virginia's black electorate. The governor began his reconciliation tour after he was embroiled in a blackface scandal stemming from a photo in his medical school yearbook that left many black leaders calling on Northam to resign. The governor ignored those calls to resign and instead began his reconciliation tour. When he first announced it, many in the black community, including this reporter, thought the governor was blowing hot air and trying to squirm his way out of a tight spot. The latter may be true, but he definitely wasn't just blowing hot air. Governor Northam created a new position in the state government, naming the country's first ever Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer, and appointed a black woman, Dr. Janice Underwood, to that position. Since taking that position, Dr. Underwood has helped to shape the governor's policies when it comes to the black agenda in Virginia and historical justice. This week, Governor Northam held a press conference, rattling off a list of actions his administration has taken to reconcile with Virginia's racist history.
Historic justice is dedicated to telling a more true and inclusive story of our shared past. It means teaching history that accurately reflects the stories and experiences of everyone. Historic justice is intended to correct historic injustices. My administration has taken a number of significant steps to advance historic justice and reframe how we interpret and tell our shared history as Virginians. Last year, we worked to remove the name of Jefferson Davis, the former president of the Confederacy, from the Park and Memorial Service Arch at Fort Monroe. The monument was offensive to many, and it was the first Confederate monument to be taken down by our Commonwealth. Months later, I returned to Fort Monroe to commemorate the 400th anniversary of the arrival of enslaved Africans in English North America at Point Comfort. And last year, the Department of Historic Resources erected the first historic highway marker at a site of a lynching, an important step in grappling with our painful past. When we tell a fuller, more inclusive story of our past, we can better address how that past affects our present. We have to understand where we come from to know where we're going. That's why I created the Commission on African American History Education, to make sure that we're teaching our students to draw connections between the past and the present.
The governor also rolled out several budget items for the 2020 General Assembly session that he says will tell a more accurate story of our past.
This session, we have several budget items and initiatives to ensure that we are telling a more accurate story of our past. The first relates to historic monuments and statues. These are among the most visible symbols of history. Virginia is home to more than 220 public memorials to the Confederacy. A war fought to maintain an economic system that relied on the enslavement of human beings. Some Virginians view these memorials as an honor to the sacrifices of their ancestors. But for many others, Confederate memorials are a reminder of the enslavement and torture of their ancestors. And because many of them were erected during the time of Jim Crow and massive resistance, they are a reminder of the segregation and discrimination of our own lifetimes. These monuments tell a particular version of history that doesn't include everyone. In Virginia, that version of history has been given prominence and authority for far too long. So I am proposing that we allow localities to make their own decisions about the monuments and war memorials in their jurisdictions.
That's right.
Thank you.
Now, along with supporting legislation that would allow localities like Charlottesville to remove Confederate monuments from public lands, the governor also wants the General Assembly to pass laws that will allow greater funding for historically black cemeteries. Here locally, Harrisonburg's Newtown Cemetery may be a step ahead of many historical black cemeteries around the state. In the past several years, Harrisonburg City Council paved the roads in the cemetery, which were eroded dirt and gravel when I was growing up there. In 2014, the cemetery was placed on the Virginia Landmarks Register, and then in 2015, the Newtown Cemetery was placed on the National Register of Historic Places. These are the things that matter to black Virginians. Northam's persistence and commitment to right the state's historical pasts is paying off for the governor, and he polls an approval rating between 55% to 65% amongst African Americans, depending on which poll you are looking at. Now, there are some that will say the governor isn't doing enough, and then there are many on the right that will say he is doing too much for the black agenda. One thing's for sure, despite his past, if the legislation Northam is backing passes in the General Assembly, Ralph Northam will be the most pro-black Virginia governor in modern history. The governor's complete rebound from the blackface scandal is proof that actions speak louder than words. His critics are still criticizing him on social media for the blackface scandal. Meanwhile, the governor is backing meaningful legislation that is important to black Virginians that were offended by the scandal. And that is precisely how you reconcile a situation. In the Breaking Through Newsroom, Theodore Whitelow, Breaking Through News.